All right, so as we were talking about at the beginning of the hour, there are lots of things that have limits on them. And what we're going to be doing today is graphing them. So if, for instance, you can have no more than 4 walleyes in the state of Minnesota to be able to keep, then you would use which of these signs? Well, it's got to be less than or equal to 4. So if I wanted to do it like this way, walleyes is to be less than or equal to 4. All right. So there's the graphs of them look kind of like this. Let's say I took this one and I graphed it. It would look like this. Why? No, it wouldn't. Sorry, that's a different problem that I did for the other class. Sorry. It would look like this. I go through -5. Do you remember that? Put a dot down there. Everybody put a dot down there. I'm going to pause for a second to show you something on your iPad and how to make that work better. So if you want to graph it like this and say, okay, I know the slope is 2, I just go over and up, put a dot, over and up, up 2, over, rise 2, run 1, rise 2, run 1. Do that a few times, and then just kind of go, okay, that's good enough. So you know, for graphing, you can draw lines, no problem. It's the dots that you have trouble with. One last option I want to show you with your iPad on making a dot. Put in a text box, everybody. Put in a text box. You know how to do that? Once you put in the text box, go into the text box and find the dash. It's under the, and when you touch the dash, hold the dash down. Do you see the dot? Put a dot in, and then you can always change the size of the dot and move the dot. Get what I'm saying? That was under dash on the keyboard. Find the dash and then touch and hold. Make the dot. And then make the dot bigger. And then you can slide it over. I think periods are too small, but I don't know. These are would period work if you make it big enough? Really? Okay. All right. Anyway.
You can change the color of the dot too.
Can you change the color of a period? All right, so that works just as good, I guess. All right, anyway, from here, is this line the answer? No. Because it's a less than or equal to, I now need to shade. Now, some tips on shading. I know some of you are shading like obsessive and would want to shade every single inch of the thing underneath it, but what I recommend you do is make just a little dashed line like this, a little like the hash marks. That shows which direction it's shaded in. And the reason is because I know where you're going with this. And if you take forever trying to shade in one of them, well, where we're going with this is we're going to have another line like this, and then like another line like this, and this one will be shaded here, and this one will be shaded here, and it'll get really confusing to see where they all overlap because you've shaded the whole stinking screen. You know what I mean? If you just shade a little bit on each side, you can easily see where they all overlap. And then that's the area you should super shade like this. Now, remember how we were talking at the beginning of the hour about iPads being made at Foxconn, and they were saying, okay, well, we got to keep the number of hours that our employees work under this, so we're going to have more people jumping off the roof, and we're going to have to keep our number of production up above this because our stores need to have more iPads, and then we need to keep it underneath this line because we're going to be drawing too much power, and pretty soon the electric company is going to like cut us off or whatever. And then if you shade those all together, you get your answer. The typical problem for today looks like this. And where we're going to go with it is within a few days, you'll be just analyzing these a little deeper, and you'll be taking the corners here, and those are actual numbers of, like, let's say it might be production of iPads versus iPhones at this certain Foxconn plant. And they can figure out that if we produce this number, which is an X comma Y point of, like, let's say, 20 iPhones, and 5 iPads per hour or whatever, that this versus this versus this, you would optimize and figure out what's the best combination we should make at our plant to make the most money. Do you think that Apple makes more on selling a iPad or selling a cord?
The cord.
Believe it or not, the cords have a much higher markup on them than the iPad themselves. Apple actually makes Here's another interesting one. If it's Apple versus, let's say, Dell. Dell sells a PC, Apple sells a PC. Apple has like 40%, 30-40% of it's going to be money that they make. They're like making money on it. Dell, probably 5%. And amazing, Apple has a way higher markup, like they make higher profit margin for selling a computer or whatever than Dell does. So their product, could you say their product's overpriced? Well, yeah, sort of, but nobody else has their product, so it's really hard to compare it. You know what I mean? Because like if it was when I was looking, you know, they have stuff that the other ones don't. And anyway. Okay, so this is kind of long run what we're heading towards. Let's look at another one. Again, big picture, this is kind of what they end up looking like, but on yours, would you please just make me a quick sketch of what you think that graph would look like? Remembering that the 1 is the rise, over the 2 is the run. That is the slope, is 1/2. I'm going to pause while you figure that one out. Try to make a quick sketch for me. All right, so I had the kids work on the next 2 problems. This one, you should have gone through 3, which is right here, and then you'd have had a slope of 1/2. That means rise 1 and run 2. Rise 1, run 2. Rise 1, run 2. Rise 1, run 2. I'm just going to put in a few dots. That's why it would be really nice if you could make dots easily, because the graph, once you get the dots, it's easy to make the line. Okay, so now from there, should that line be solid or dotted? Dotted. Now, it's okay if you just go back and take your eraser then and make a narrow eraser and go like this. It makes a dotted line. See? All right, so now, should I shade above it or below it? Well, it says greater than, so I shade above it. And yes, it's fine with me if you just make a little dashes like that. That's good enough. You don't have to try to shade the entire area. We get the idea. It's shaded on that side because it's greater than, and greater than means shade above it. All right, now what does this really mean? This means that every single point that's up here, like let's say I pick that one right there. That point is over 3 and up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. If I go over 3 on the x and up 7 on the y, then this should work. So I'm going to check it. 7 is greater than 1/2 of 3, which is 1.5. 1.5 plus 3 makes 4.5. Get how 7 is greater than 4.5? So it works. And what do you think about all these points down here? They don't work. That's why we didn't shade down there. So if we put those points into the equation, they won't work. They won't be greater than, like it says it will be. All right? Okay, moving on to the next one. If you did this one right, you should have divided everything by -2, and that makes the sign flip. Notice I divided everything by -2. This one becomes y less than or equal to 4 divided by -2 is -2x, and then that's negative, and a negative makes positive 1/2. I start at positive 1/2. I'm going to put a big dot right there. And what does that slope of -2 means? It means it doesn't rise 2 and then run 1. It falls 2 and then runs 1. Fall 2, run 1. Fall 2, and it's going to go off the screen. So there's my line. And now how do I decide if it's solid or dotted? If there's an equal to, then it's a solid line. If there's no equal to, then it's a dotted line. All right, so that's a solid line, and it says less than. Notice I shouldn't shade it until the very end of the problem. I would have thought I was shading above it, but now I'm actually shading below it, and there we go. How many of you had that one right without any help from me? All right. So are there any questions about how these work? If you shade more than one of them on the same graph, it's just going to do like I showed you before. You'll end up with another line here and another line here, and if you know which way to shade them, there'll be oftentimes a triangle, sometimes a rectangle that gets shaded, and then that's all you do for today. But what we're going to do with it is take the corners and of the shaded region, and then we'll pick which of those ends up giving us the most profit. Or sometimes we want to minimize costs, which one will cost us the least. In a school situation, oftentimes we're trying to limit the costs because we don't make a profit here. You know what I mean? We just have kids and we educate them. We don't like sell them then for lots of money. Okay, if we could, then schools would run different. But bottom line is we try to educate you as best we can, but we don't have profit. But we do have costs, and we can try to minimize our costs. Like for instance, a while back they installed these little things in the room up there that when the lights, when people aren't in the room long enough, there's no motion in the room, shuts all the lights off. Okay? Do you see how that costs money to install, but might actually save money in the long run? Yeah, because they can keep the lights from being on when people forget to turn them off, or custodians go through and forget to turn them off, and then the lights will turn off by themselves.
We stayed still.
If you stayed still for like a half an hour, completely still,
Do it?
no, you could never do it. But anyway,
Great. We did that in third grade. Shut off? No, we didn't shut off, but we tried for like
your teacher was probably just trying to get you guys to be quiet and settle down. All right. So if you graph all three at the same time, oh, one more thing. Ones that have just one letter, sometimes they confuse people. X equals lines are lines that look like this. X equals 6 right here at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 right there. The line just goes straight up and down. So X equals lines go straight up and down that way. Sorry, my iPhone is conflicting with the... And the Y equals things go this way. Okay? And you still shade above or below them the logical way, except how can you shade above or below something go straight up and down? You can't. But I bet you'll pick right. It says less than. Which way do you think we should go? To the left, like this. That make sense? All right. I think you know everything that you need to know. And we have a fair amount of homework today. I'm going to cut it down a bit for you, but it's those 2 worksheets, and all I'm asking you to do is problems 1 and 2 from both of them. So you can skip the rest, which does save you a fair amount of time. On the other hand, it needs to all be done by tomorrow. Problems 1 and 2 off both worksheets. Okay? That's the assignment for tomorrow. You should be able to find those worksheets under today's date, which is 4-23 on Schoology.